Hello, Julie here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm going to be creating a double page layout as part of my design team work for Off the Rails scrapbooking, and this is the mood board for February. I have incorporated a lot of mixed media into this layout. I collected up a few supplies. I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do with this layout, but I collected some papers that I thought might go together, and this particular one, which is a Kaisercraft Love Notes paper, I thought I could use the wider side of that. The DCWV burlap colours is a stack of burlap sheets that are 12 inches by 12 inches. I thought I'd use the orange ones from there. A selection of pattern papers, some mists, some acrylic paints that I would use to probably colour some texture paste. I've got an assortment here of distress inks that I thought I would use with a stencil. As I said, I didn't really have a plan, but I just got out a few things, and I wanted some gesso to sort of dull that background down a little. I'm going to start by creating the background. I trimmed the edge off of I actually trimmed the white paper down to 11 inches by 11 inches, and I trimmed the black down to 11 1/4 square. Then I used double-sided tape to attach the music notes to the black cardstock. Of course, I used my black ink to ink around the edge of the sheets before I attached them to the black. I got my filming sequence out of whack, so I didn't actually show this first page, but what I did was I took some gesso and my palette knife and just scraped the gesso over the whole sheet of music note paper. I gave it quite a thick coat and I didn't make it smooth, so it has plenty of creases or grooves in it from the gesso being applied with the palette knife. As you can see, it's quite a thick coat of gesso, so I set that aside to dry overnight. Then once the next day came, I used my hot glue gun and attached the layers that I'd already created onto the burlap. It was a bit tricky getting that on there because the burlap did seem to pull out of shape a little bit, but yeah, I figured that it's going to fray off anyway, so having it not exactly in place was fine. My next step was to use Candied Apple Distress Ink through a Kaisercraft stencil. I don't know the name of it. It came as one of 4 on a 12 by 12 sheet. So I did that just down the edges of the pages, well, not even the whole edge, just randomly down the edges, so that we got started to get a bit of texture into the background. Using the same technique, I've used a Prima zigzag stencil over the top of an open circle stencil, which is a Scrapbookings Australia stencil. I've marked off around that so that I didn't get any of the ink in areas I didn't want it. And then I've used my distress ink called Ripe Persimmon to stencil through the zigzags and make a circular embellishment on my page. I then, just before I lifted up the stencil, I drew around the circle with a black pen. I did an assortment of sizes of circles just for a bit of interest. My next element, I used some modelling paste once again, and I mixed that with some Sunrise Orange acrylic paint, and I used this stencil that I had once again masked off. It was a Crafters Workshop, I think it's called Chevrons, and I applied the orange coloured texture paste through that chevron stencil to add a bit of orange to the layout. I applied the orange texture paste in 3 areas on each of the pages. Now I've selected these papers to create my layout. I'm going to start cutting them up. The yellow one I'm going to cut 5 inches by 4 inches and 5 inches by 3 inches. The red that I'm cutting here, I am 6 1/4 by 3/4 and 5 7/8 by 1 1/2 and 4 7/8 by 1 inch. The orange paper I cut at 6 3/4 by 1 inch and 5 1/4 by 1 inch, and I used the red with the black text on it for my photo mats. Once I had all my papers cut to the size I wanted, I inked around the edge of all of them in preparation to attach them to the page. I decided to put a rough sketched outline around each of the orange chevrons that I had put on with the texture paste. I wasn't careful with this, I just wanted something there to make them stand out a little more from the background. Everything that I'm doing here I do on both pages, but I don't necessarily show you both pages. No point in watching the same thing twice. Now I'm going to start to position and attach my pattern papers to my layout. This is just a matter of putting them down and then fiddling around with them and moving them around until I'm happy with where they're going to go. To help my photo stand out from the background, I use this emery board and file around the edge of each photo before I actually attach it to the photo mat. I wanted to add a bit more black to the layout, so I used this stamp that used to be attached to a wooden block. I don't even know what brand it is, it's so old. And I used my archival ink and just stamped that heart randomly over the page. I think I've done 4 stamps on each page. I do put the stamp in position and then put a acrylic block on top so I can get even pressure. The stamp doesn't actually stick to the acrylic block, so I'd put it down by hand and then put the block on top. Once I'd completed my stamping, I used double-sided tape to attach all of my photos. So once I'd finished with the stamping, I used my Kaisercraft alphabet uppercase die called DD700 and some black cardstock and cut out the letters and attached them to the layout using some glue. As a final touch, I decided to use some chalkboard spray. It's called Tomato Cerise, and I'm just giving it a good shake, and then I'm going to just splatter in the background. I've made some masks so that I don't get any on the photos. So that completes my layout for today. I don't do double page layouts very often, but when I do, I quite enjoy the finished product. If you've enjoyed my video today, please subscribe to my channel and pop over to Off the Rails Scrapbooking and enter the competition. There's great prizes to be won.